I highly recommend the 10 Really Dumb Mistakes book. Now, if you're a reader, the book I think is great. If you're not a reader, we have the video book. The video book is the essence of the 10 Really Dumb Mistakes. It's in video book form, so you open it and it plays the video, and it's I think it's very entertaining. It's very cute. It's animated, and it really is a enjoyable way. You can watch it together with if you're married, you can watch it together with your wife. Kala, also you can watch it together. But the point is, you got to get yourself an education. I don't know. There's nothing short of an education that's going to help you. One resource I believe is the 10 Really Dumb Mistakes, either the book or the video book. Coming to this course, these sessions are also a resource. There are many resources, but you got to make sure that you get yourself a really good education, because without it, you're going to make a lot of really dumb mistakes that don't have to be, and that you're going to, I'm afraid to say, as many people do, greatly regret. Okay, so let's begin. We'll start this week's session, and this week's session is called Best Friends. Again, the name of our chabura, and it's important to keep in mind, is Matzah o Motzeh. And the reason for that is, I mentioned this last week, but it bears repeating, Shlomo Melech was the wisest of all men. And he said in a pasuk in Mishlei, Matzah Isha Matzah Tov. If you find a woman you found good, your life will be wonderful, life will be good. But he also said, Umatzah ani mar mimoves es Isha. I find more bitter than death is a woman. And ultimately that's what it is. It's Matzah or Motzeh. And the point here is that, and this really is the punchline, that often it's your choice. It's often your choice how you act in the marriage, how you conduct yourself, is often that ultimately makes a difference. As I mentioned again last week, I've seen this many, many times. A match made in heaven and a living in Gehenna. And not because anyone's deeply flawed, and not because anyone has deep psychological or emotional problems. They don't understand the relationship. They don't understand the marriage. They don't know what they're doing. And gentlemen, this one is on you. It is very, very easy for you to do your part. As we discussed last week, one of the main goals of the husband is to romance his wife. You do that, life is beautiful, life is wonderful. And what I want to do is, before we start this week's session, we'll do a quick recap of last week, and then we'll get into this week's session. Okay, so let's begin. There are 3 pillars to a successful marriage. And the first pillar is commitment. Commitment is based on knowing that Hashem has chosen the perfect one for you. She may not be your dream as you dreamt it. She may not be the one that you would have formed or created, but your Creator, who knows you better than you know you, who loves you more than you love you, formed for you the perfect match. And the understanding that Hashem knows what He's doing, and Hashem doesn't make mistakes, is what's going to, Mitzvah Hashem, give you the commitment to work, to do the very often very difficult work of making this a successful marriage. So the first pillar is commitment. And the second pillar of a successful marriage is love. And that's the relationship. And that's the bond, the connection, the spending time together, the gifts, the love notes, all the things that a couple in love should be doing. We'll get back to that in a moment. But the third part of a successful marriage, which is often the most difficult, is learning to live together. You see, many couples are very committed and they do love each other, but it's the learning to live together part that gives them a lot of difficulty. However, again, gentlemen, this one is so easy if you spend the time working on the middle pillar, the love. That is something you could so easily change, and it can make such a difference, because love, as we said last week, love is the glue to a marriage. If the relationship is solid, if you guys are connected, if you're bonded, okay, there'll be issues, there'll be problems, but he's a good guy with a flaw. But a good guy with a flaw is a guy who I love, a guy I respect, a guy who I want to continue spending my life with. But once the relationship starts to wane, you become distant, you become foreign, he becomes a creep and a bum, and anything he did, he never did right anyway. And the one time he did one thing right, it was for the wrong reason. And before you know it, it is a very, very rocky road. And we mentioned last week 2 points that we see clearly from Chazal. One is that Shalom Bayis is holy. Hashem would be Mashana. Hashem changed Hashem if it could be lied. When to the Malachim said, Sorry, Menu said that she is too old, and because Hashem did not want Avram to hear the words that Sarah said he is too old. Shalom Bayis is holy, so holy that Hashem would be Mashana. And number 2, it requires constant work. The Malachim wanted to add to the love, as great as the love between Avram and Sarah was. The Maral says, in the course of history, there was never a connection between husband and wife as it was between Avram and Sarah. Yet the Malachim wanted to add to that. Where is Sarah? They asked that question so she would answer, Hinehi ba'ol. She's a tsunua. She's not out in the limelight. By saying those words, he would gain a great appreciation for her tznius, to make her more beloved in his eyes. And this is one of the dumbest of the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make, forgetting that love is the glue of marriage. And again, gentlemen, this one is more on you than anyone else, because one of the tools that bond is romantic love. There are a number of tools that bond. There's attraction, infatuation, romantic love, physical intimacy, respect, appreciation, friendship, love. There are many, many tools. You have to use all of them. But romantic love is one of the most powerful ones. And if you focus on one yesod, what can I do to make my wife happy? When a woman knows that her husband deeply cares about her, when a woman knows that her husband cherishes her, she's fulfilled, she's happy, she's in a good place. If he shows her in word, deed, and action that she's number one, that she is his priority, when she knows that he cherishes her, at that point everything is good. Everything, again, not everything's going to be perfect. There's still going to be hiccups, there's still going to be issues, still going to be things you have to adjust to, but the relationship itself is there. She's happy, she feels satisfied. There may be still things to work on, but in general things are good. And gentlemen, this is yours. It's the husband's role to romance his wife. Okay, so that was a recap of last session. Let's begin this session this week. Okay, the session this week is called Best Friends Who Love Each Other. And let me explain to you why this session is called that. It's a chazal. The Sheva brachas that we give the chas and akala are based on the Gemara in Ksuvas, and the Gemara in Ksuvas uses a very interesting expression: Sameach tesamach reim ha'ahuvim. Be joyful, be happy, reim ha'ahuvim, friends who love. Now, reim ha'ahuvim is not exactly clear what it means. Be happy, be joyful. But Rashi says, I'll explain to you exactly what reim ha'ahuvim means. Reim ha'ahuvim ha'chosam v'kala shem reim ha'ahuvim zeh zeh. Reim ha'ahuvim refers to the chassan and kala who are best friends who love each other. That is the definition of the relationship. Best friends who love each other. But it's two elements, friends and love. And both have to be there. The romance part and much of the physical intimacy, the touch, a lot of the things that get involved deal with the love part. But the friend part is an equal part of it. It's best friends who love each other. And because this is one of the tools that bond, I believe it's a fundamental. And I'll share with you something that I find very profound. I'll ask a couple who married 10 years an interesting question. I'll say to them, are you guys friends? Are you friends? Usually I get some stammering. I mean, we're committed, we love each other. I ask them, are you friends? Well, we used to be friends, but you see, if you're not still friends, then there's something lacking in your marriage. Friends have fun together, friends support each other, friends look out for each other, friends are friends. And this is one of the tools that bond. One of the very important tools that bonds is friendship, but you have to understand what a friend means. So to understand what a friend means, I'd like to share with you some of the rules of friendship. And let's begin with the very first rule of friendship, and we'll begin it with a little story. And this is pretty close to Maisa Shahaya. Basically, the story goes like this. A fellow comes home at about 7 o'clock, comes home after a long day's work, and he's exhausted, he's tired. He plops himself down on the couch, and he opens a Mishnayos, he starts learning. Okay, one of the kids pulls down some books, another kid knocks over a sofa, another kid pulls down some toys. The place is going chaos. His wife is in the kitchen, and there's steam rising. But it's not from the pot, it's from her ears. She says to herself, I don't believe it. This guy's going to sit there. He's going to sit there while the kids wreck the apartment. I'm slaving right in the kitchen. He's just going to sit there. A minute passes, another minute passes. Finally, she gets up, stalks over to the couch, points a finger and says, all right, mister, up off that couch. You're either cooking dinner or you're taking care of the kids, but you are not sitting there any longer. Okay, listen, he dutifully obeys. He says, hey, I'll take care of the kids. He takes care of the kids for a while. They eat dinner together. They bathe the kids, give them baths, and put them to bed. And a few hours later, he's sitting on the couch, and she sits down right next to him. And she doesn't quite understand why, when she sits down next to him, he kind of like squirms away. So she moves a little closer, and he moves further, and she moves closer, and he moves further, and she moves closer, and he moves further, and for the life of her, she can't understand it. What she doesn't understand is that for the past 2 hours, like a tape recorder playing in his mind, are the words she said to him. All right, mister, up off the couch. All right, mister, you're either taking care of the kids or doing dinner. You're not sitting there any longer. All right, mister, up off the couch. And he firmly reaches the conclusion, oh my goodness, I married a drill sergeant. And she made one of the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make. Now, don't get me wrong. Was she right? Anyone with any dots would agree. If your wife is slaving away, the kids are wrecking the apartment, get up, be a mensch, help her. There's no question that what he was doing was outside the realm of what we'd expect a considerate husband to do. And she's justified and right in what she felt. But the problem is that when she steps out of the bounds of being a friend and a lover, a supporter, and becomes something else, what happens is she wrecks the relationship. And here's the question that you need to focus on if you're married, and if you're not married, it's a focal question to keep in mind for the future. And here is the question. In your marriage, in your household, who is the boss? Who's the boss? Who's in charge? I mean, who's in charge of what you do? Who wields the power? Who makes the decisions? Who is it who is in charge in your marriage? And gentlemen, listen very carefully to the words I'm going to share with you now. The word is no one is the boss. No one has carte blanche. No one has the right to say my way or the highway. You are best friends who love each other. Friends negotiate, friends discuss, friends reach compromises. But the idea of someone standing up, pointing the finger and saying, all right, mister, up off that couch, is a violation of friendship. Now, let's not make any mistake. You're going to do it, your wife's going to do it, and these things are okay. And you roll with the punches and you go on. But you have to understand that these are the fabric of your relationship. And when you find yourself doing this, you have to recognize that what you're doing is damaging the relationship. Now again, if your wife does it or you do it, it's okay. You go on, you forgive, you forget, you move on. But if you're doing this on an ongoing, continual basis, and people do this regularly, what you find is in a very short time, you become distant, you become very, very apart. Friends don't threaten, intimidate, or bully one another. That's not the way friends act. And gentlemen, this is the yesod. And coming from a yeshiva background especially, you have to really understand this clearly. In the times of the Rambam, in the times of Chazal, the world was different. Men were different, women were different, society was different. And then in that world, we could have a debate about who's in charge, who's the boss, who wields the power. But in our world, when you get married, you are equal partners with different roles, but equal partners. No one has carte blanche. No one is the boss. No one says it's going to be my way. I have the final word. And if you're going to try that in your marriage, you're going to find yourself in a very, very difficult position. And this is the very first rule of friendship. Friends don't boss friends around. And you have to be very, very aware of it. If you're a chassan, you're probably saying to yourself, what in the world is he talking? I'm never going to do that. My kala would never do that. And then you get married and you quickly discover that in the heavy traffic of life, you got to get things done, or she bounced a check again, or she was late for the carpool again, or whatever it is. And before you know it, you find yourself acting like an autocrat, like a dictator, like a boss. And before you know it, you realize you're wrecking your relationship. You're not the boss. You're not the totalitarian dictator. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in a marriage. And the first rule of friendship is that no one is the boss. And this, my friends, is one of the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make, forgetting that they're best friends. And it could be a man, it could be a woman, it could be one or the other, sometimes both. When you violate this rule, what you're doing is you're violating one of the cardinal rules of a successful marriage. Reim ahuvim, best friends who love each other. But best friends mean you work on things together, you compromise. Now what should she do? He's acting like a creep. He's acting like a callous guy. He's just sitting on the couch while the kids are wrecking the apartment, I'm cooking away. What she should do is communicate. And likely the time to communicate might not be then, but certainly the method of communication is not by pointing a finger, that's it, Mr. Up off the couch, because that's the way you act with people who are underlings. You act that way with subservients, you act that way with servants. But if you act that way to your best friend, you're undermining the relationship. Now again, these things happen, and we let them go and we pass them. And gentlemen, let me say this now. If you find occasionally that your wife does this kind of thing, she gets overwhelmed and she says things, you have one choice. You either learn to just ignore it or you suffer. We all make mistakes, we all do things wrong, and that's okay. What I'm explaining is in a general sense. If you take the attitude, or your spouse takes the attitude, I'm in charge in this area, when it comes to finances, I'll be the decision maker. When it comes to kashrus, when it comes to the... Now again, make no mistake. You could have divisions of labor, and you could have a decision. When my wife and I got married, my Rebbe, the Shiva Zatzal, held very strongly the domestics are up to the wife. And the Shiva Zatzal would tell us on a regular basis, gentlemen, stay out of domestics. That means what type of drapes, what color paint, how to decorate the house. The house is the woman's domain. And if you have such a decision in your marriage that it's the wife's domain, the domestics, and your domain is halacha, the hashkafa, which again, my Rebbe used to tell us to do, that's a fine decision that you two reach together. But that's a joint decision that you two reach together. Let's say your wife is much better at finances. You allow her to you say, I think you should keep track of the finances. That's a fine decision if she's better at it than you, but it's a joint decision that you give one party control over an area. But no one has a right to take control. No one has a right to say, it's my way. And gentlemen, I want to share with you, there are many, many times when a wife, sometimes guys also, but a woman will overspend, and she's really spending recklessly, and you don't have any way to stop it. And the only way is to stop her from spending is to take away a checkbook, cut up the charge cards, whatever it may be. No one understands what you're doing. You might win that battle, and you might stop her from overspending, and likely you're going to pay the price because you're going to wreck your marriage. But what am I to do? I don't know, but one thing for sure, friends don't bully, friends don't boss, friends negotiate, friends reach terms together, and once you reach the point where you say, it's a disaster and I have to put my foot down, you're stepping on very, very dangerous grounds. So that's the first rule of friendship. Friends don't boss friends around. Okay, let's move on to the second rule of friendship. So here we go. What happens if? What happens if someone attacks your spouse? Okay, you're at a dinner and someone says something nasty or something cutting, or someone just says something that's very not nice. What is your role? So if someone attacks your spouse, it is you and your spouse against that person. If someone insults your wife, someone says something wrong, says something improper, it is you and your spouse together against that person. Now that's obvious and that's simple. But gentlemen, hold on to your seats here, because this is the chiddush. What if that person is right? What if your spouse really messed up? What if your spouse is doing something wrong? What if your spouse is being whatever it may be, and that person tells your spouse off? What do you do then? So gentlemen, I got news for you. It is you and your spouse against that person. Your job is to be behind your spouse. Your job is to support your spouse. Your job is to assume that your spouse is right and to support. But I know she's wrong. He knows she's wrong. We all. How could I? The answer is because that's what friends do. Your job as a friend is to be deaf, dumb, and blind to anything wrong that your spouse does. And if someone points it out, it's you and your spouse together against that person. But how's my spouse ever going to know? And the answer is, I don't know if she'll ever know, but one thing for sure, she better not hear it from you. Because if she hears it from you, all she's going to hear is a direct attack on her. Not that she burnt the kugel, and not that she tells dumb jokes, and not that she always comes late and inconveniences people. What she's going to hear is, he doesn't like me. He doesn't approve of me. As a matter of fact, most women hear it a lot more clearly. He hates me. He's angry. He's furious with me. I cannot tell you how many times callers, young wives, and even married women for many, many years will tell me, he's furious with me. He's so angry with me. He hates me. Why does he? Now, he's not angry. He doesn't hate her. But the criticism in the relationship is so detrimental. It's so disastrous that she's going to hear it like an attack. And it is your job to defend your spouse. If someone points out that your spouse did something wrong, it is you and your spouse against that person. And let's not make any mistake. Many guys get this part right in public. They defend their wife, and they're good, and they're good. And then when they get home, they say, Ruchi, I just want you to know, I defended you in public because I don't want you to be embarrassed, but you should know that person was right. Blew it. Blew it. Blew it. Your job is to defend your spouse. You're a friend to your spouse. You're a support to your spouse. You're not a mentor. You're not a rebbe. You're not a mashgiach. But how is she going to know? I don't know. But one thing for sure, she better not hear from you. You don't like criticism. She doesn't like criticism. None of us like criticism. My spouse is supposed to be my best friend. That means she's in my corner. She's my support. She's on my side. She's not there to point out what I do wrong and what I need to improve on. Her job is to be my support, and that's my role to her. So the first concept is that even if you know your spouse is wrong, it's your job to support her. But here's where things get very, very interesting. What if that someone who argues with your spouse or attacks your spouse is your brother, your friend, your cousin, or your sister? What do you do then? What if it's a family issue and your sister has a real taina against your wife and she complains against what your wife's doing? And what if you know that your sister is right? Gentlemen, it is you and your spouse against your sister. You and your spouse against anyone, because you're her friend, you're a support. Your first priority is to your spouse. But here's where things get very, very interesting. What if that someone who attacks your spouse isn't just a brother, sister, friend, or cousin, or even an uncle? What if it's your mother or your father? What do you do? What does Allah demand? Your father criticized something your wife did. Your mother said your wife is doing something wrong. And you know that your mother's right. What do you do? So if you're not quite sure what to do, let's learn a pasuk in Chumash. Al kein yazov ish es avi ve'es imo. When a man gets married, he leaves his birth house. He leaves his house of origin. He leaves his father and his mother, v'davak bi'ishto, and he clings to his wife. Your first priority is your wife. The closest relationship is the marriage relationship. Your first priority is your spouse, and that is your number one obligation. You're obligated to support, to help, to aid, and certainly to defend your spouse, even if it's your brother, your uncle, your mother, your father. I don't care. If the entire world says your spouse is wrong, it's you and your spouse against the world. And you really have to get this clear, because when you understand this, you'll understand your role. Your role is a friend. A friend is a support. A friend is a help. Yeah, but Rabbi, shouldn't friends give tochacha? Shouldn't they be mochiach? Shouldn't they rebuke? Try that one on one of your guy friends and see how well it's received. Go over to a guy. Go over to a guy you know and tell him, you learned that halacha wrong. You're doing this wrong. You put on your tefillin this way. Have this. No one likes criticism. But in a marriage relationship, it's so devastating, so disastrous. It is not your job to be the mentor, the rebbe, the mashgiach, the drill sergeant. Your job is to be a support, a friend. Your job is to be there. What is a friend? A friend is someone who takes the side, is in your corner, someone who has your back. That means you and your spouse are best friends. And being a friend means even if your spouse has an issue, maybe it's a temper, or she gets into a fight with a friend, or she said something to a family member, and that family member is really, really furious, was really hurt. Your job is to be on your spouse's side. What happens after that is not your concern. That is the second rule of friendship. Friends support each other. Let's move on to the third rule of friendship. And to explain to you this rule, I'll share with you an interesting story. I was speaking once at a Shabbaton. It was a Shalom Bayis Shabbaton. And a fellow comes over to me and says, Rabbi, you have to help me. I have a problem. You got to help me. You see, I'm a doctor and I work in the ER. And I'm around all these nurses all day long, skinny, thin, young nurses. And my wife, listen, I love my wife, but here's the problem. She had our first child and she put on some weight. And she didn't lose that weight. She had our second child. She put on some more weight. She didn't lose that weight either. Then she had our third child and she put on some more weight there. She's now 40 pounds overweight. Rabbi, you got to help me. What do I do? I don't want to look at other women, but what do I do? Okay, so what do you say to a person who comes to you with that question? So I said to him what I will typically say in that case. I said, young man, you have a choice to make. You either embrace your wife as she is or suffer. I explained, I don't know of a woman who looks in the mirror and says, 40 pounds overweight, geschmack, that's just what I always wanted to be. So here's the question. Why doesn't she lose the weight? You offer a nutritionist, you offer a diet plan, you offer an exercise plan. Why doesn't she lose the weight? The answer is because right now, there's a little bit too much on her plate, and 3 kids might be a big part of it, but for whatever which reason, it's not going to happen. As much as you want her to lose the weight, she wants to lose it even more. So why doesn't she just lose the weight? Because change is very difficult. And you either embrace her as she is now, or you suffer, because you're not going to get her to change. Believe me, as much as you want her to change, she wants to change even more, but for whatever which reason, it's not going to happen. And this is the third rule of friendship. Friends accept friends for who they are. And gentlemen, I have to share with you, if you're not married, you don't know what I'm talking about. But if you're married, I'm sure by now, if you're married more than 2 months, 3 months, 4 months for sure, you'll know very well what I'm talking about. There is an incredible need to change my spouse, to make them different, to make them more of a version as I am. And the only way for you to be happily married is to keep in mind the third rule of friendship. Friends accept friends for who they are as they are. And I'll give you an interesting example of this. I was learning with a chassan once, and he said to me, it's so interesting. I'm always so hot. He was a husky fellow, and he said, I'm always so hot. And my kala, she's always freezing cold. It can be 80 degrees outside, but she'll say she's cold. And it's so funny. It's so cute. And I said to him, young man, good morning. This is going to be the first test of your marriage. I said, I guarantee you what's going to happen is as follows. You're a mensch. So if your wife says that she's cold, you'll close the window, you'll put on the heat, whatever it may be. But it's going to come the wintertime, and you're going to wake up one night in a sweat. And the apartment is going to be boiling. And you're going to say to yourself, I don't understand it. Why do we have to keep the thermostat so high? I'm spending hundreds of dollars a month more than I have to for heating this place, and there's no reason. Why is she carrying on? Why is she acting this way? And that is one of the simplest tests of your marriage. Do you know why she's acting that way? Do you know why she's carrying on? It's for one reason. Even though it's not cold to you, she's not carrying on. What she's doing is she's being a people, and people are different. And she really is cold. And here's the problem with that. It sounds obvious while you and I are talking about it, but when you're experiencing it and everything in you says it is not cold, I'm sweating, I'm drenched, it's not cold, you're going to have a sense that she's carrying on. And it's your ability then to say the words, clearly my experience doesn't define reality, is going to be one of the great determinants of the success of your marriage. So many times we human beings get locked into our world. If this is my experience, it defines reality. If I'm hot, it's hot. And no one else has a right to feel otherwise because my senses tell me it's so clear. If this is my nature, this is my temperament, this is the way I view things, it's clear, it's obvious, this is reality. And recognizing that your spouse has a different temperament, different nature, different interests than you is one of the keys. You see, gentlemen, this is the hardest part. The learning to live together part is the most difficult part of marriage. Why? Because the commitment you can work on. And the love, hopefully you pay attention and you do what you're supposed to and you have a good relationship. But the heavy traffic of life, the learning to live together, and more than anything, learning to live with another human being is very, very difficult. You see, it's very easy to be a guy in the dorm. The guy next to you is sloppy, whatever. It's got nothing to do with you. Your roommate comes late to Shachris, what's it got to do with you? You have independent lives, so it's very easy in that world to be easygoing, to be a friend, whatever. But when you get married, you're melding two lives together. And suddenly everything you do together. From the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to sleep at night, what you do for vacation, what you do for fun, whose relatives do you go to, where do you go for Shabbos, how do you go? Everything you're going to do from the moment you break that glass is going to be together. And to mix together two lives is very difficult. Why? Because each human being is unique. Each human being has a different way of doing things. Each human being has very real pet peeves and idiosyncrasies and specific things they like and specific things they don't like. And all of us have at least a couple of things that are absolutely abhorrent. I just can't stand it when fill in the blank. And I almost guarantee that your spouse is going to have at least one of those things that you just can't stand. And here is the great secret. Gentlemen, are you ready? This is the secret. This is the secret. And when you get this, hopefully, you'll have a much easier time being successfully married. Are you ready for this great revelation? The great revelation is your spouse has a deficit. Your spouse has a deficit. I can guarantee it. Your spouse is either too quiet or too on time, no fun or irresponsible, timid or noisy, too bold, too neat, cheap, domineering, spend so much flighty, meek, sloppy. I guarantee that your spouse has a deficit. How could I guarantee it? It's very simple. Because if your spouse didn't have a deficit, they'd be done their job here. Hashem created us imperfect. Hashem put us here to grow, to accomplish, to change the essence of me. If I were perfect, I'd be done my job here, say Shalom Shalom, foot in the kever, and it's over. Hopefully, I still got things to work on. And understanding that I have things to work on has a corollary. So too does my wife. And understanding that I have deficits. I hopefully have strengths, I have talents, I have abilities, things I do well, things I do very well, things I do okay. And there are definitely things that I don't do well at all. I have shortcomings, flaws, idiosyncrasies, quirks, and things that make it difficult for another person to live with me. And as I have those, understanding that my spouse has it also is one of the keys to learning to live together. You see, gentlemen, I'll let you in on one of those interesting observations of human nature. Watch a married couple, successfully married, mediocre, lousy, it doesn't matter. Everyone has something about their spouse that bothers them. So he's either too on time, or he's too late, he's too sloppy, he's too neat, everybody's got something. And it's not just that we have something, we become experts at what our spouse does wrong. I can't help but notice it, I can't help but see it, and I can't help but point it out, even in the nicest sort of subtle way, how much better she'd be if she were, how much happier she would be if she would, how much better life would be if only she would be. And this is one of the most wasteful, most destructive parts of most marriages. Wasteful because it doesn't accomplish anything. She never changes. And destructive because it damages the very relationship and just causes untold amount of dissatisfaction and disharmony. And recognizing that I have stuff and my spouse has stuff. And getting used to that is one of the great secrets of being happily married. People have different aspirations, desires, interests, dispositions, natures, tendencies. And when you mix those two together, learning to be flexible and learning that my wife has a different way than I, but that doesn't make it right, wrong, or anything other than my way and her way, and learning to accept that is one of the great challenges. Gentlemen, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that there are different personality types. Some people are very organized, some people are very spontaneous. Some people are risk averse, some people are risk takers. Some people are very introverted, some people are really extroverted. Some people are morning people, some people are night people. When you recognize that it is impossible for you to be identical to your spouse, you realize that there are going to be many, many things that you don't do in the same way. And your ability to adopt, your ability to embrace your spouse, your ability to recognize that I have my way, she has her way, and I have to do my best to adopt her way and make her as comfortable as possible will be very, very helpful for you to be happily married. Well, shouldn't my spouse adopt to me? I guarantee she's going to have a huge amount of adopting, a huge amount of getting used to. But you see, it's a two-way street. And if you learn to be flexible, you learn to accept her ways, you learn to get used to it, and many guys don't. Many guys become very rigid, very locked in, and they spend 20 years, 30 years trying to change their spouse. Women do it as well. And recognizing this key yesod, your spouse is the way they are because that's the way their creator made them. The same way you are, the way you are, because that's the way Hashem made you, that's the way Hashem made your spouse. And your choice is either to embrace them as they are or try to change them. Now, again, most people try valiantly, with tremendous zeal and energy. They do everything in their power, spend untold amount of time, energy, and resources to changing their spouse, and it never works. It never succeeds. Typically, what they're trying to change is their strength and their spouse's weakness. If I'm very on time, I'm going to want to make my spouse that way. If I'm very neat, I'm going to want that for my spouse. And for the life, I can't understand why it's so easy. It's so why? Listen, I'm neat. Why can't she just be like me? And understanding that you're that way because that's your nature is one of the key. I had a guy once. This is the most crazy thing. This guy had a tie-in against his wife, and he said to me, "I can't respect her. I can't respect her. They're married a bunch of years, bunch of kids. Why can't I respect her? Listen, she doesn't care about their health. We talk about health food. She doesn't eat the health. She doesn't eat healthy. She doesn't feed the kids healthy. She doesn't exercise. I just can't respect her." Now, here was the problem. This guy was one of the most disciplined human beings I ever met in my life. He'd wake up every morning at 5 a.m. exactly on the dot, and jump into a freezing cold shower just so he could master himself, work out for 40 minutes, plan his day, and then go daven, and that's how he began his day. One of the most disciplined, rigid people I ever met in my life. And I said to him, "Do you know why you are that way? You are that way because that's the way you are. That's a bracha that Hashem gave you. Hashem gave you self-discipline. Hashem gave you that as a talent, and that's great. And you should continue that. But your wife isn't that way. And you know why you are the way you are? Because that's the way Hashem made you. And you know why your spouse is the way that she is? Because that's the way Hashem made her. And demanding that she be you is foolish, it's a folly, and it's self-destructive." And gentlemen, I'd like to explain to you why it's so damaging to the relationship. It never works. It'll never succeed. But I want to share with you why it's so damaging to the relationship. Here we go. If I ask you the following question, what does it feel like to be loved? What does it feel like? So most people, if they ask me that question, they'll say things. It feels respected, accepted, approved, cherished. Good feelings. When someone loves you, you have a good feeling inside of being accepted, approved, etc. What happens when someone tries to change you? What do you feel? You don't feel accepted, you don't feel respected, you don't feel approved, you don't feel cherished. You see, when you try to change your spouse, what you're doing is you're imposing your will against your spouse's will. You're attempting to mold her into your image, and you're going to force it. And you know what you're doing in plain, simple language? You're bullying your spouse. Now, you may think you're being a nice guy, you may think it's better for her, better for marriage, better for your family, and in a sense you might be right, but you know and understand that what you're doing is you're bullying your spouse. Now, what if you bully her nicely, discreetly, subtly, or with consequences? Make no mistake, you're doing the same thing. You're bullying her. When you bully your spouse, guess what she is receiving? She's receiving an absolute tyrant, a boss, a nasty guy who doesn't care about her or anything else, and she will not be very pleased with that. She will not be very happy, and she sure is not going to feel that she's cherished and loved. And as much as you work on the commitment, and as much as you work on the relationship, if you're not going to work on the learning to live together part, you're going to give her constant messages of you're not good enough, you're inadequate, what you're doing isn't good enough. And what you're going to do is heap upon her, inadvertently, but heap upon her criticism. And in a very short time, she's going to know she's not good enough, she's not accepted, and she certainly isn't cherished. And this is a very big deal because we all do it. And gentlemen, Baruch Hashem, I'm married now 36 years. I love my wife loves me. We have a great marriage. And I have to tell you, I still to this day have to make sure that I resist the urge, because everyone knows it would be better if. And we all have our thing. It's again my strength and my spouse's weakness that she would do much better to adopt. And learning to resist that and learning not to give in to that urge is a tremendous, tremendous challenge, but one of the keys to be successfully married. So many times guys say, I don't know why she gets so upset. I don't know what's wrong with her. I buy her flowers and I say nice words to her, and she always gets upset. But if you watch carefully the way he acts on a regular basis, what she's also receiving is a barrage of criticism, a barrage of you're not good enough, you're always late, you're not good enough. Now he may say it nicely, he may say it politely, but the meta message is there, you're not good enough. And there's only one choice, gentlemen. The choice is either to embrace your spouse as they are or suffer. And that's really the choice. Most people make the choice of suffering. Most people really just, they'll try and try and try. 10 years, 20 years. Eventually, some people are smart enough they give up. Some people don't. Some people continue throughout their married life. 40 years later, they're still fighting the same fights, still trying to change the same things. So my suggestion is learn early and learn this well. You are the way you are because that's the way you are. Your spouse is the way she is because that's the way she is. I have a Musar exercise that will change your marriage, may just change your life. Here you go. Gentlemen, I'm not afraid to say it to you. Ladies, I'm usually a little hesitant to tell them, but here is the Musar exercise. I want you to go over to a mirror when no one's around. I want you to point at that face looking back at you in the mirror and say these words. I am a difficult person to live with. I am a difficult person to live with. I am a difficult person to live with. You mean my spouse? No, you. I am a difficult person. And you have to be. You know why you have to be? It's not that you're obnoxious, it's not that you're a creep, but we all have stuff. We all have our idiosyncrasies and quirks and things. We're either too late or too sloppy or too neat or too whatever. We're OCD or ADD or whatever it may be. We all are difficult. I'm not difficult to learn. I had so many friends in camp, and I was a great guy in the dorm. I had no problem. What? It's only with my spouse. Right. It's only when you meld two lives together, when it's really demanding, that the essence comes out. And no one understands, as much as it's difficult for you to live with your spouse, and I guarantee there are going to be things that irk you, things that bother you. You can love your spouse, she can be the greatest, but there are going to be things that bother you. But as much as those things that she does bother you, I guarantee she's going to have as many or more things that bother her. And your ability to look in the mirror and say these words, I am a difficult person to live with, will make it much easier for you to accept the deficits, the shortcomings of your spouse, and hopefully get to a point where you no longer need to change them. And this is a tremendous, tremendous yesod, and is something that afflicts most marriages. Okay, but let's move on to another, very, very important point. Many guys, maybe 6 months after the wedding, a year after the wedding, will say the following comment. Listen, she's okay. I mean, I love her and all right, but I'll be honest with you. Like, why does everything have to be her way? Everything. It's like everything in the world has to be her way. Okay, I would like to share with you, I doubt she's domineering. I doubt she's a difficult person. I doubt she's a brat. I'd like to explain to you that most likely this is a very normal phenomena called mixing, melding two lives together. And I'll explain to you why. There are going to be vast numbers of differences between you and your spouse on so many different fronts, in so many different areas. It could be money, communication issues, who does household chores, who you go to for which yontif. There are going to be thousands upon thousands of things that you and your spouse do differently. So let's take 10 areas. Let's assume that there are 10 areas that you and your spouse do differently. By the way, most guys, after 6 months of marriage, wake up one morning and say to us, "Oh my goodness, we're so different. How in the world can we ever get married? How can we ever be married? We are so different. She's this, I'm that, she's this, she's that." And I'd like to share with you, I guarantee you're right. But any different that you find me in temperament, nature, disposition, I guarantee there's a big difference between you and your spouse, and that is that you are of opposite genders. And women and men are so apart, polar opposites, that by far is the greatest distinction, the greatest difference, far more than spontaneous or extroverted, introverted, risk-averse, risk-taker. All of those things are minor in comparison to the differences between men and women. So here's a simple reality. There are going to be at least 10 things that you guys have a different approach to, a different way of doing things. So let's say you're a fair guy, and you say, of those 10 things, we'll split them up 50-50. So 5 of those things we'll do my way, 5 of those things we'll do your way. Okay? You're a fair guy, now it's a 50-50 split. You're going to do things equally. Okay. So here's the problem. Let's say you're going to say 5 of those things we're going to do my way, 5 of those things we'll do her way. Those 5 things that you're going to do her way will likely surface many times during the day. So let's take an example. Let's take a very interesting example because this one is pretty common. Let's discuss something called risk tolerance. Now, are you by nature risk averse or risk taker? And once you answer that question, we should do a poll for this. Are you risk averse or risk taker? And once you answer that, the question then is your spouse risk averse or risk taker? So I'll share with you an interesting observation. Amongst people between the age of 15 and 24, men are 10 times more likely to drown than are women. Interestingly, when they talk about flash flooding and cars going under and being flooded, again, men are 10 times more likely to be killed in a flash flood than are women. Now, isn't that curious? Why is it? Is it because men swim much more than women? No. Is it because women are much better swimmers than men? No. So are women much better drivers than men? Why is that? And the reason is, the great why, is because men seem to be far more comfortable with risk than are women. It's a general statement, but it's generally true. Most men are far more comfortable with risk than are most women. There's twice as much anxiety in women than there is in men. Women tend to be more anxious, tend to be more cautious, tend to be less comfortable with risk than men. Okay, so let's take this thing called risk averse, risk taker. Let's assume that you're more of a risk taker and she's more risk averse. Okay, now, in this area, this difference between you and your spouse is going to surface in a lot of decisions and a lot of different behaviors. So, for instance, it's going to surface in what time you leave. Do we leave on time or do we leave late? Do you lock the car every time you park it or not? When do you file taxes? How close to April 15th do you start getting nervous? How fast do you drive? Is it 5 miles under the speed limit, 20 miles over the speed limit? Do you leave your car double parked for 5 minutes or do you not? You see, this nature of being a risk taker or risk averse is going to surface multiple times during the day. So let's assume that 5 of these things you're going to do your way, and 5 of these things her way. One of those 5 is in terms of risk. In terms of risk, since she's nervous, you're going to do things her way. Well, guess what? It's going to surface many, many times during the day, in many, many ways. And before you know it, it feels like everything we're doing her way. But what you're not realizing is the other 5 things that also surface multiple times during the day, you're doing your way. And yes, it will feel like you're doing everything her way. And to her, it will feel like she's doing everything your way. Good morning, America. Welcome to marriage. And this is why marriage is a very challenging relationship. It is the closest relationship. It's the most beautiful relationship, the most supportive relationship, but it is the relationship that requires the most work. Commitment, love, and the third pillar, learning to live together. Chazal define it, Re'im ahuvim zeh zeh. One of the tools that bond, and this is the key to tonight's discussion, one of the keys that bonds is friendship. Friendship means being a friend. Friendship means not bossing my spouse around. Even if I'm right, even if I know the right way, and even if the halacha is my way. And by the way, on a regular basis, guys will ask me that question. I had a guy once ask me the following question. He's married 6 weeks, and his wife is wearing skirts that are too short. What should he do? What should he do? I asked him what Beis Yaakov did she go to, and he named the reputable Beis Yaakov. What seminary did she go to? He mentioned the seminary. So I asked him the following question. Tell me, do you think she knows the halacha? Probably. So why does she wear skirts that are too short? And the answer has nothing to do with knowing the halacha. Right now, for whatever reason, she's not holding there. And maybe you wish she would be. And maybe you're not proud of it. And maybe you wish she'd be different. And maybe, in a general sense, maybe you could discuss it vaguely. But I told him, don't ever directly tell her you feel her skirts are too short. Why? Because she's not going to hear the words that her skirts are too short. What she's going to hear the words are, I disapprove of you. I look down on you. And most likely, if she's a girl, she's going to hear, I condemn you, I hate you. You didn't say that, you didn't mean it, but that's what she's going to hear. And more than that, as things progress, it's going to become an issue between you, and it's going to be more and more difficult. I said, my suggestion is work on the marriage. Show her that you're a friend. Show her that you cherish her. Be supportive. Hopefully, she'll feel more secure. She'll feel more content. She won't need to prove herself to the outside world by wearing the gang colors, the short dress to show that she's cool and she's in. Hopefully, she'll have more sense of self, more self-presence, and she'll be able to adopt that which she knows is the right way to be. But one thing for sure, if you point out to her directly that what she's doing is wrong, it's going to backfire. It's going to become a point of contention between you guys. It's going to be something where she feels inadequate, she feels condemned, she feels not good enough. And anytime she actually wants to wear a longer skirt, wants to be motsanua, it's going to be very difficult because she was condemned for it, put down for it, and not approved of it. And instead of being a friend, you're attacking her. I said you ignore it, work on the relationship, and be mispal, and hopefully she'll get the message. You see, gentlemen, this is the yesod. Friends don't boss friends around. That's the first rule of friendship. Re'im ahuvim are best friends that love each other. Friends don't boss, friends don't threaten, friends don't intimidate, friends don't say my way or the highway. And in the marriage, learning that you're friends and remaining friends throughout the course of your marriage is very difficult. When you understand that, you understand that friends embrace each other. My spouse is going to be different than me in a myriad ways. And understanding that there's only one reason. She likes it this way because that's her nature, that's her temperament. And by the way, gentlemen, you want to know something I found out after 35 years? It took me 35 years. A little while back, I found this out. And Baruch Hashem, now it's 36 years. But after 35 years, I discovered something. Whenever we're driving on the highway, certainly when we were recently married, if my wife would put on the radio, I would make it louder so I could hear the music. And whenever it got to a level where I could actually hear it comfortably, she'd make it quieter. And this went on for years, and I couldn't understand it. Why is it whenever the music gets to the right level, it's too loud and she makes it quieter? Well, is she a party people? I don't get it. She's a fun-loving person. She's fun. Why is that? So would you like to know what I discovered? The threshold for comfortable hearing, typically for men, is 8 decibels higher than it is for women. Women are more sensitive in their hearing and will hear something more acutely at 8 decibels lower than will a man. And the reason why my wife felt the music was too loud or the news was too loud, or whatever it may be, was because she is a woman and I am a man. Now, Baruch Hashem, we have a great marriage, and despite her playing the music, I didn't make a big... But it was a kasha that I had for years. And knowing that this is but one of 10,000 differences between you guys, and knowing that there's only one way to adopt, and that is to embrace your spouse as they are. Friends don't boss friends around. Friends don't change friends. Friends accept each other as they are. And when you understand that, you understand you're not the mother, the final authority, the mashgiach, the sixth grade teacher, the traffic cop. You're a friend. Re'em ahuvim zeh et zeh. And I want to close one last sort of, it's a story. I can't say it's a story because it's a tshuva that Rabbi Keiga wrote. So I can't call it a story, but in an Igeris, in a tshuva, Rabbi Keiga responds to someone who read him a shidduch. And the words of his letter are so powerful. He says, how could you read a shidduch to me? My beloved, my spouse passed away. All I've been doing since she left me is been crying. All I've been doing while she was sick, I spent every energy, every ounce of my strength to help her get well. And she's left me. I'm bereft. I'm empty. How could I even think about marrying again? Says Rabbi Keiga, I spend so much time crying. I can't learn. I can't daven. I can barely see the page in front of me. How could I even think about a shidduch? Now, when you understand those words, those words were written by Rabbi Keiga, the Gadol Hador, the man whose asmada was unparalleled, the man who lived in learning, but he was so attached, so connected to his wife, and when she left, he was bereft, and he couldn't even think about someone else. He says those words, this was I should show you the Igeris. Believe that, I'm going to post the Igeris on the WhatsApp chat because you have to read the words themselves. You have to read the words and understand what a marriage is supposed to be. It takes a lot of work. And there are many steps involved. There are 3 pillars. The first pillar is commitment. Second pillar is love. Third pillar is learning to live together. You have to use the tools that bond. And you have to understand what a friend means. Friends don't boss friends around. Friends don't bully friends. Friends embrace each other as they are. And you work on it. You grow together. And Mitzvah Hashem, you get to that point.